Hi, welcome to 109 The Page. I am Scott. We are doing 5-year battle PG Wodehouse. The years are 1942 through 1946. Let's go ahead and get started. Before I do a breakdown of the books published between the years of 1942 and 1946, I do want to do just a quick little wrap up of the books that were selected as the number one book for each 5-year period beforehand. uh, Starting in 1902 through 1906. It's the first 5-year period, and the number one book that period was Love Among the Chickens. 1907 through 1911, the book that was number one that period was Mike. 1912 through 1916, the book that was selected that period was Something Fresh. 1917 through 1921, the number one book is A Damsel in Distress. 1922 through 1926, the book selected was The Inimitable Jeeves. I love having to say that word. 1927 through 1931 is Summer Lightning, which is the second Blandings Castle book that we selected. 1932 through 1936 is Hot Water. In 1937 through 1941 is Code of the Worcesters, which is the second Jeeves and Wooster book that is selected. Not surprising that Blandings Castle and Jeeves and Wooster have multiple selections in here. The first book published in 1942 through 1946 is Money in the Bank. It is published in 1946. This is basically a caper novel having to do with hidden diamonds and a man who falls almost immediately in love. I do have to say that when it comes to Wodehouse's romances, I kind of like this one more than others. I wouldn't put it at the top of my list. I think coming immediately to mind with no further reflection, which may change, I think probably the romance in Something Fresh is probably the one that immediately comes out to mind as the top romance. But if I were to reflect on it, that could probably change. Obviously, no romance from Jeeves and Wooster would come near the top. But so there's just a lot of characters. We get the return of Chimp and Soapy and Dolly, criminals who have appeared in other works, which they're always entertaining when they show up. So I think that I am going to put this as number one for this period so far. And also, it is number one because this is the only book published in this 5-year period. If Wodehouse had published his first novel in 1901, this 5-year period wouldn't have nothing in it because he published a book in 1940 and then didn't publish anything again until 1946. So 1941 through 1945, if that was a 5-year period, that would be it. It's not because he necessarily slowed down or wasn't a prolific writer, because obviously we could tell beforehand and we can see after, which we will see the next time we do a video. Publishing many books during the period is not an issue that he has. There are a few circumstances that caused this to happen. Number one being World War II. Obviously, something like that had an impact worldwide, and it impacted Wodehouse too. Was not Wodehouse was not normally the type of person to let outside events really influence him. You could tell that by his writing, which, especially the more you read it over the space of time, kind of becomes a little bit timeless. You can't really necessarily set what time his books are in. Jeeves and Wooster published in the 1910s, and Jeeves and Wooster published in the 1970s don't necessarily seem that different. Obviously, we don't get a Bertie Wooster in the 1970s who is like old. He seems to be the same age that he has always been. So Wodehouse doesn't really pay much attention to the outside world, but of course, sometimes you can't help it. And where he was living at the time, he was basically interned for a while, kind of a prisoner, a little bit of the Germans, and then that lasts for a while, and then for reasons that can be debated, but that I personally think of has to do with Wodehouse being a bit naive when it comes to the outside world. The man had an amazing wit, obviously a fantastic writer, but when it comes to outside the writing world, he didn't really have a lot of street smarts, I guess I would say. So he ended up recording some radio interviews, I guess, that kind of came across as German propaganda. And that kind of turned public sentiment against him. So, with World War II, him essentially being interned and uh, him essentially being held prisoner in a way, and then public sentiment turning against him, he didn't publish anything from 1941 through 1945. Money in the Bank is the first thing he published after, and actually, he did have a little bit of issue with his books, I believe, being printed in England for a while, and he actually did not return to England for a long while. I don't know if he ever returned in his life. I think he did, but I can't remember off the top of my head. But I know he spent a lot of time in France, and then he lived in America. He actually died in New York and is buried there, I believe. Which, if you listen to the podcast, Robin has a few issues with Woodhouse when it comes to like people taking cold baths and climbing down water spouts. That she has threatened to go dig up his grave, which I was heavily against. But she thought it was England and discovered it was in New York. I'm not going to tell her exactly where because I don't want Mr. Woodhouse, Sir Woodhouse, to be dug up. That is the years 1942 through 1946. Now, next time, I am going to have more books. He is getting older. I mean, at this point in time, in mid 1940s, he is about 60 or so. He's because he is released from capture essentially. I don't want to say he was like a prisoner of war because his accommodations were a lot better than what you would see from a prisoner of war. Uh, but he was basically under house arrest, I guess you would say. But any man over the age of 60 is not required to have been held then. And when he reached 60 during this time frame, he was released. So he turned 60 during this 5 year period. And this is mid 1940s. He died in, I believe, 1976. I may be incorrect on that, but I know he published Ants Aren't Gentlemen in 1974. And I know Sunset at Blandings, which is a unfinished novel published posthumously, was published in 1977. So I believe he did die in either 1975 or 1976. He was working on Sunset at Blandings when he died. So he was in his 90s when he died. So we are going to have quite a prolific career after this. Not as prolific, I think, as probably like the 20-year period before the 1940s, but still fairly prolific. Uh, Still very good novels. He still has many novels that I think could be definitely some of the number ones that I listed before. Would it be all of the number ones? I don't know. I don't think so off the top of my head, but I also know that I've read, mm, I won't say most of the stuff because I still have some stuff I need to read, but I read a lot of the stuff published after the 1940s, and I know that I have loved some of it. So we still got a while to go. We still got stuff that could be better. We have so many Jeeves and Wooster novels. Uh, I do need to make a slight correction that somebody pointed out in the comments. For some reason, even though I know it wasn't the case, I did say Code of the Woosters was Wodehouse's first published Jeeves and Wooster novel. It was not. What you would know if you had watched the video before that, where I talk about previously published Wodehouse Jeeves and Wooster novels. I just recorded our podcast, I'll Be Dash, a Wodehouse podcast with my daughter Robin, a few days before I recorded the video for the years 1937 through 1941. And Code of the Woosters was on my mind because I was talking about the book that we were talking about then, which was the last collection of Jeeves and Wooster stories. So just a mind blank, an error on my part. I did correct it in the description, but I wanted to pass that along here. But this is a short one this week. We had one book. I did have a debate with myself whether or not to do this or to move that book to the previous or the next 5-year period. But and I have had that happen before, but it's been at the end uh, with Agatha Christie, and probably going to do it again with PG Wodehouse because have had books published after their death. So depending on how many books there are, I may just the last selection may be 1972 through question mark, or depending on how many books, because I know there's Sunset at Blandings, and I do know there are short story collections. So if there are enough, I may just do 1977 through question mark. But this is in the middle of it, and I didn't want to move this book published between 1942 and 1946 into one of the other ones. So is it the greatest book ever? Probably not. Do I think that if it were in the last video or in the next video, do I think it would be number one? I don't think that would be the case with the last video. I am not positive about the books that are coming in the next 5-year period because I didn't look at it. I do think this is a very good book. I assume that it's probably not going to be number one if I were to move it forward, but could be in the top three. And depending on what he published in that time frame, maybe it could be number one. I don't know, but it is number one now. It is going to the final competition. Depending on what it goes up against, it may either be easily defeated or, hey, maybe it could be a sleeper agent and go the way to the end. I don't think so, but you never know. I know from my experience with the last 5-year battles with Agatha Christie and Stephen King that I think one thing about what the end results are going to be, and it's not always the case. I think especially with Stephen King, that was the case, and a little bit with Agatha Christie. But that is it for this time. Please like and subscribe, leave a comment, and I will talk to you next time.